Hey everybody, it's Jeremy, and welcome to another episode of Sipping with Jeremy. And today we're going to be talking about blended scotches from Compass Box Whiskey. So Compass Box was originally founded in the 2000s by John Glazer, who was working for a predominant blended Scotch whiskey company, but decided to walk his way out to explore more of what you could do with blended Scotch. I was actually lucky enough to meet John about 8 or 10 years ago. He was out here. Compass Box is located in London. John is an American, but as I said, he was working for a blended Scotch company, so he was located in London, and that is where Compass Box is located as well. But he was out here visiting about 8 or 10 years ago, and I got to meet him, and he's a really cool guy. Very informative, is a wealth of knowledge. I remember he spent like 15, 20 minutes just explaining to me the difference between like single malt and grain whiskey and the emphasis that those put on when blending whiskey together. So just a very informative guy. Actually on their website for Compass Box, when you're checking out these whiskeys, you can actually look up each one and they'll tell you exactly what's blended in there. So all the information that John has in his brain and all the people that he works with, it's able to be found on the website too, which is really cool because a lot of the whiskey world is big hush hush about what's blended or what's this. They will tell you where the whiskey came from, what kind of a cask it was in, and what percentage it makes up of the whiskey that you're going to be drinking. So talking about their whiskeys, we're going to be talking about 4 different Compass Box whiskeys today. We have their Orchard House, the Story of the Spaniard, the Spice Tree, and their Peat Monster. And let's go ahead and get started with the Orchard House. So Orchard House is the newest of the core SKUs for Compass Box. This is a blend of 8 different whiskeys, 7 which are single malts. There's 1 blended whiskey in here as well. The majority of this is a blend of 3 whiskeys. 1 is from the Kleinlich distillery, and then 2 from the Linkwood distillery. So I've said this before when talking to customers about the Orchard House. This reminds me a lot of like what an Irish whiskey would be for a Scotch drinker. What I mean by that is there's a lot of soft flavors here. It's very round. It's very easy drinking. Has a lot of like red fruit. Has a little bit of a pear kind of note to it as well. So there are some apple and pear kind of characteristics to it that you sometimes do get in an Irish whiskey as well. But then there's this really nice brininess. There's a softer kind of earthy peat note. So I don't mean like a smoky peat. You're not talking about like a Lagavulin or even like a peat monster, which we'll be talking about later today. But more just that kind of like earthiness of the peat. And that really nice briny saltiness goes really well with that those fruit characteristics as well. So it just gives you this really nice mouthfeel that kind of develops in all these flavors. Again, you get those softer fruit notes from the pear and the apple. You get a brininess. You get the earthy kind of peat. So you get that more mossy kind of earthiness there too. So just a full rounded one, but again, nice and soft on the finish. So definitely if someone who likes Irish whiskey, if they're looking to get into Scotch, this is a great way to introduce them to it. If you have someone who likes Scotch and you want to get them to Irish whiskey, start them off with this, see if they like it. If they do, then you can move on to some more Irish whiskey. But we're here to talk about Scotch, so let's go ahead and move on to Compass Box's Spice Tree. So the Spice Tree is a blend of 5 whiskeys, 2 single malts, and 3 blended whiskeys. The majority of this is actually going to be those blended whiskeys which come from the Highlands. So Spice Tree is a really good name for this whiskey because there is a lot of vibrant spice flavors up front. First, it's a little bit of the oak spice, then you get some really vibrant baking spice here too. So a nice kind of combination of that oak spice, baking spice, brings in a little bit of a dark fruit kind of characteristic, and then a little bit of toasted toffee too. So a little bit of richness, but the super vibrant spice note is really just fluent throughout the whole process. You just get this really vibrant spice flavor, and it just kind of stays on the palate. While you do get those softer kind of rich flavors of the dark fruit and that little toasted toffee that I mentioned, the spice is really what drives this one home. And it's not aggressive spice, like it's not like it's hitting your palate and you burn or anything. I mean, this guy is only at 46%, so it's not like it's a high proof whiskey that's going to burn your palate, but the spice characteristics really come through on the palate, and it's really nice because it does bring a nice vibrancy. It keeps it kind of refreshing. This would be a fun like summer kind of Scotch, I would say. The same thing with the Orchard House. I would say the Orchard House would be a nice one to do like a whiskey and ginger with, but I think this would be a really fun one to do a whiskey and ginger with as well, because the spice notes would just kind of pop up even more and have a little bit more vibrancy with that ginger ale. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the Story of the Spaniard now. So the story of the Spaniard gets its name from when John Glazer and a friend were traveling through the south of Spain, and an older Spanish individual decided to teach him what sherry was. Sherry is also very influential in Scotch whiskey at the moment. Some of the bigger brands out there, brands that we carry like Glendronach and Dalmore, all have sherry expressions, and it's really because there's a great softness that you can get from these sherry casks that you can't get from anything else. So in that kind of realm, the story of the Spaniard was created. This is a blend of 10 different whiskeys, 8 of which are single malts, 2 are blended whiskeys. 5 of these whiskeys are aged in some type of sherry barrel, and about half of this is made up of a single malt from Macduff Distillery and from another one from the Linkwood Distillery. The flavors really just coat your palate, kind of just seep in. There's a lot of butterscotch, dark fruit, a little bit of vanilla, softer kind of oak spice there too, and then a nice brininess that keeps it really balanced, because there is a lot of rich flavor in this one, but that little bit of brininess, there is a little bit of a soft earthy peat too. Those two really help contrast the sweetness so it doesn't just overtake the palate too much. And so there's a really nice layering effect, which is kind of a common characteristic with the Compass Box whiskeys. Now let's go ahead and move on to the big boy, the Peat Monster. So for people who are looking for that big smoky flavor that they love in Scotch, if you have people who like Lagavulin, people who like Laphroaig, the Peat Monster is the Compass Box whiskey that you would jump to. And funny story about Peat Monster is it actually started as a single barrel project that John Glazer did with a retailer. I'm not exactly sure where. I think they were more in the Midwest. But yeah, they were a retailer who were looking for a super smoky whiskey. John sent them a couple different ideas, and they just kept asking for more smoke and more smoke and more smoke. And so John was like, all right, I'll give you the smoke. And so he sent them over one, and they loved it. And so they called it Peat Monster. A little later after that, John was like, hey, maybe we should, or someone at Compass Box was like, hey, maybe we should do a peated whiskey as well. So when the retailer was no longer interested in doing another barrel, they were like, okay, well, can we make this, but can we call it something else? They're like, yeah, no problem. So they changed it from Peat Monster to the Peat Monster. And this is a whiskey that is a blend of 6 different whiskeys, 5 which are single malt, 1 is a blend, and the majority of this whiskey comes from Laphroaig and Cole Isla Distillery. So this whiskey definitely has some big peaty, mossy characteristics to it. There is a lot of that big smoke peat up front, but it's not in an aggressive way by any means. It's kind of a combination of a smoky peat and an earthy peat. Kind of reminds me of like if you were sitting next to peat moss as it's being fired into the malted barley. That kind of flavors, or that smell that you would get from that, where you get this nice kind of smokiness, but you also get that earthiness of the peat too. So while this is a big peaty whiskey, it's not an aggressive, hurtful peaty whiskey like there are some out there. There is a certain brand that loves to uptake their peat level each year just to make it smokier and smokier. I don't think that's anything that Compass Box is ever going to aim for. I think this is something that they're looking to do, like, hey, if you like smoky whiskey, you have a smoky whiskey here, but there is also some balance to it. So there is some really nice, like, softer stone fruit notes here. There is a nice little bit of toasted toffee flavor. And again, that brininess, that there seems to be a consistency with Compass Box, and there's a nice briny characteristic in a lot of their whiskeys. And the brininess here really helps balance out that big, earthy, smoky flavor of the peat here with that stone fruit to give you just a little bit of a contrast to those bigger flavors. You got these big, rich flavors in the peat and the moss there, the peat moss, and then you get the softer brine, you get the softer toffee flavor, and that little bit of stone fruit helps lighten the palate a little bit, so it's not just big and heavy peat. Just a great balance of this whiskey where you do get those big peat flavors. So someone who likes those peaty whiskeys, they will like this, but it also isn't just peat. There's something more behind it. That's the true measurement of what blended whiskey is. With a lot of those single malt whiskeys, you're getting one flavor and you're kind of sticking with that flavor because that's what they're going with. With a blended whiskey, you can kind of get into that realm of like, cool, so we want some big smoke, but then we want some really nice softer flavors to balance it out, and you can do that. And Compass Box is a great example of what artisan blends really are. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this episode of Sipping with Jeremy. Thank you for joining us. I hope you learned a little bit of something about Compass Box, and I hope it intrigued you to try these great blended whiskeys. So, as I was mentioning with the Peat Monster about how these are great examples of what the artisan of blended whiskey is, that's for all of what Compass Box does. There's a Zoom event we did, which I will have the link for below. After this, we did a Zoom tasting with Scott from Compass Box, and he's a great guy. Even though he is a San Francisco Giant fan, he's a really nice guy. And in that Zoom, one of the things I mentioned a good amount was that there is a true artisanship to blending Scotch whiskey, or blending whiskey as a whole. Just the art of blending whiskey is really, it takes a talent, because it's easy for a single barrel project to be like, oh well, this is what we have, this is a single barrel, it's going to taste like what it's going to taste like, because no barrel tastes the same as another barrel. So it's easy for like, oh, we just put out single barrels of stuff, so it's going to taste the way it's going to taste. If you don't like it, man, maybe try the next one, it might be closer to something you like. Where with blending scotches or blended whiskeys as a whole, you're going for consistency here. Again, on Compass Box's website, they tell you what the blends of each of these whiskeys are for each of their batches. So that means they're working with different things. You can look through the history, and you can have a consistency with Spice Tree, with Story of the Spaniard, with Peat Monster. I don't mention Orchard House because it's a newer one for them, but that's going to be coming too. We're going to see multiple, batches of all of these whiskeys, and there's a consistency throughout all the batches, and that's thanks to blending, thanks to the masterful blenders that Compass Box has, that are going, okay, so this has a general profile of this, let's add a little bit of this, let's add a little bit of this, let's take some of that Linkwood, let's take some of that Macduff, whatever it is. They're working with these different distilleries to get these barrels, and then blending them together to get as close as they can to what the last batch tasted like. And that's just a tip of the hat, because, again, you're trying to go for consistency here, and that's really hard to do when everything tastes so different every time you're blending together. So Compass Box, great blended whiskeys. For some reason, there's a lot of people out there who think that blended whiskeys are kind of below them, unless you're taking something that has a green or a blue or a black label, that if it's a blended whiskey, it's not that good. That's not the case at all. There are great blended whiskeys out there. Compass Box is a great example of that. And blended whiskeys are really cool because you get to taste stuff, or you get to taste things from distilleries that don't often sell themselves. Macduff Distillery. I've never had anything from the Macduff Distillery on its own, but that's one that you can taste in these Compass Box whiskeys. And it's not like you're going to be able to, pull that out specifically, like, oh yeah, this is that specific. But it's still really cool because there's these distilleries that don't get their name out there, that thanks to Compass Box and their transparency on their website, where you can get all the information for each batch they do, you get to know which distillery your whiskey comes from. But again, y'all, thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to us. Don't forget to check out our website. All 4 of these are available at the store. We'll put the links below. I'll also put the link to the Zoom tasting we did with Scott earlier. And there's also 3 packs from Compass Box. Compass Box does these really cool gift packs where it's 3 50 ml whiskeys. They have one where it is the Spice Tree, the Story of the Spaniard, and the Peat Monster all together. The Orchard House is in a different 3-pack. But yeah, there's just really cool, just smaller ideas for gifts, something that's just a quick, easy one. So it's really nice to just have these little packs that you can hand someone. But those will also be available when they're available through our distributor. But thank you all very much for joining us. Hope you had a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Drink well.